will start writing sometime this year. This is a poem from a fellow who I used to sell jewelry and furniture for, Mitchell Young. He's at Equipment.
Okay, what's his name?
His name is Mitchell Young, Y-O-U-N-G. And this is A Prayer in a Poem Unto My King, is the name of the poem. It's fairly short. I've not read it. I look to the heavens, call out your name. Save me from darkness, keep me from shame. Take away all of my pride and my lust. There is no other in whom I may trust. Destroy all the evil that lives inside me. Break off the yoke and then set me free. Do all these works which I cannot do. You have the power. I believe only you. Take out the fear and my heart made of stone. Hold me and love me. Never leave me alone. Longing to be in your presence at last, forgetting my sins and my life in the past. Renewed by your spirit, your word cleansing me. Given the promise, your face I shall see. Beholding your glory, no longer to roam. Safe in your arms, I will finally be home. Mitchell Young. All right, this is another book I found that came into the shop. This is a guy named Peter Kane Dufault, D-U-F-A-U-L-T. He was born in Newark, New Jersey in 1923, raised in Westchester County, New York. And then there's a whole thing about him on the back. A lot of his poems were published in the New Yorker magazine, so he's probably well known, or was well known. I don't know if he's still alive.
Might be my cousin.
He was a candidate with the Liberal Party for Congress in 1968, which is when this book was published. This is a signed copy.
What's the title?
Here in the Winnsboro Emporium.
What's the title of the book?
It's called A Westchester Farewell and Other Poems. And he looks like he was related to Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, he does.
Looks just like Teddy.
It's like a young Teddy
Young
Roosevelt.
Teddy. And I'm going to read a couple of things out of this book. And see what happens. Well, this looks like an interesting poem. This is called On a Painting of a Mastodon in a Child's Picture Book.
Got it.
There weren't too many mastodons around in New York in 1968, so I'll be honest with you. The mastodon's gone, whose 8-ton tread shook the steps of the earth, above whose head wheeled condors wide as storms, their necks blood red. With them he is gone out of the gates of ice and quagmire to his cold bed to fossilize. In all eternity none will now lay eyes upon his mountainous haired hump, describe his mating thunders, his stance toward the tribe of men. No priest of Pan ever imbibe the groping divinity that heaved that hulk, heavy with ivory, forward out of the black cone forest and gray muskeg, snows on his back. He must have known something of the power and the glory, whose withers rose like the shore of an iceberg, and whose bones a billionth year barely will break. But long since he's utterly felled. Sometimes it makes the imagination freeze, my dears, how unsentimental God really is. On a painting of a mastodon in a child's picture book.
Hadn't thought of that, applying that description to God being unsentimental. I think in general that's true. I'm reminded of a guy who used to be, during the decade I taught a Sunday school class, had a guy in there for a few years who we took up the study of David in the Old Testament one time during that 10 years, and basically studied everything about David in the Old Testament. And probably the most well-known fact about David is that he was the apple of God's eye. And and when we first started it, this guy named G.W., first name he went by initials. His real name was Gladwin, but nobody called him that, G.W. And he said, in my opinion, God's fascination with David was that God showed very poor judgment in this case.
Right. These are cold readings. I haven't read any of these before, so I don't know what's coming. This is called Before a Birth. Moses lies deep asleep under a shadowing fringe of papyri in the undulate lap of the Nile. No blackbird's cry nor sudden scarlet of its wings will waken him. Sealed ear and eye aim inward on prehistory. That dark well in the mind, one-dimensioned artery into the heart of abstract time. Umbilicus to the first worm stirring in the Silurian sea, thread upon which, like pierced beads, hang the planets of the past, tying prophets to prawns, to the terrors of frogs and dim hungerings of pteranodons. Soon, white arms of Pharaoh's daughter through the dark reeds will reach him and beach him, crying on the future his own name in net drawn from the water. Pastward and seaward lie what's learned, survived, surpassed. Jonah, sooner than prophecy, lies now in the belly of the whale, where it's safe, and where there are no stones cast, no Ninevehs under fire and hail, no dung to digest for Israel. But O Jonah, come out. He will come forth at last, and Jehovah and the angels shout at once upon that day. They hovered over an island, lost in the illimitable gray rain ocean, and saw, or thought they saw, a dove or doves flutter from the drowned planet's rim. Yes, one lights on the smothering water, but one on the green branch, and thereafter appears the dim bulk of a boat, its decks a drench, then voices, cries, animal stench. Oh, at this hour I believe nearby in the darkness flutter the faint wings of doves. I shall receive into my hands, hurt and afraid, one who comes from the water. Yes, soon now shall again divide the firmament of the waters, God. So I have almost the whole Old Testament in that.
There was one line in there that stuck with me. No, if I understood it right, no dung for Israel to eat.
No dung to digest.
Digest, yeah.
For Israel.
Well, that's quite a phrase.
Yes, it is.
Do you have any idea what motivated that?
No, I don't.
No dung for Israel to digest. Think about it.
one more. This is thoughts while splitting wood.
Splitting wood.
That's work. Splitting wood, that's work.
Is that work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you have a splitter, then it does it by itself, right?
Well, if it's done by hand, it's using an axe or a saw is pretty hard work.
This has some Greek in it that I'm not going to be able to pronounce right, so you'll bear with me. Lifting a hammer, shoe deep in the fallen heraldries of hard and silver maple leaves, sun yellow and vermilion, three-pronged pennons, blazons, and quarterings all jumbled on the green turf. A great host overthrown. I feel like Charles Martel among the Frankish dead. The colors, the clumsy cleaving steel of the wedge, the raveling woods. Martel defends again, from the north this time, breaking the backs of logs that, like the paynim, are brands for the burning. But it takes the heart out of hammering, all this splendor, second after second, falling on all sides. It's like seeing a cinema speed-up of historic time. In one day, what a millennium of moths do to the panoplies of Aris, or in one blizzard of red rags, all the fallen of all the wars of the world. The sledge weighs half a ton when I call back my own heraldic days. A child dreaming over some scarlet blouse toy grenadiers. Boy galloping in the gaudy lists of high school ball games among flags and bands. Soldier mounted among the last aerial squadrons whose insignia stood a yard high and whose squares held till shot apart. Once, hunched in a bubble of noise and faint fluorescence over beaconless country at night, black as the bottom of the mind, I saw one solitary light totter slowly aft underneath some farmhouse hundreds of miles from any named city. Now it is I who, from the black well of the nights, look up at aircraft passing, their wing lights walking across the stars. My star was an ignis fatuus of the solitudes. Solitude, that's the last device. Man rampant upon a field with hammer. But this figure too, the moth riddles. Through thin leaves you can see more clearly how the wet-built cantilevered clapboard houses going up on the tops of ridges round about. They are fly-specking our last antique grandeur. The hills and overhead thunderers beyond sound, trailing long cons and shock waves, make the earth shudder under horses too high, hammers too terrible, either to join or oppose. The hemisphere burns in effigy, and the carrion crows cry scandal and blow above the trees like cinders out of the fire. Solitude is too well informed these mornings not to know all is lost. Yet it makes a gesture, this 1,000-year-old stance of the hammerer, good enough to drive home a point, and what else matters? Poem is by Peter Kane Dufault of Westchester Farewell.
Indeed.
Well, I read one of my original poems a few years ago.
Yes, you did. I'm sure you did.
You're going to do it again tonight.
I am. It's Bloodshed on the Bowery. That means we're on the Bowery. But
Yes,
it'd be
we
a
are.
good one to cover.
This has nothing to do with the 1907 shootout, does it?
It might. It might. You know, I did have the pleasure of working with Bill Jones on that
Yeah.
and recreating it when I moved back from Arizona.
How's Bill doing, by the way? You there? I want to hear anything.
I saw him at the grocery store the other day. He was getting his coffee at the meat market department over there,
Okay.
bakery, and he
Well,
seemed to be doing pretty good.
Of course, I heard he wasn't doing real well. I haven't seen him in a long time.
I saw him at Lee's Cemetery Board meeting the second Tuesday of this month,
Okay.
which was fairly recent.
Yeah.
And I thought he was okay, but he seemed like he was not moving as fast and maybe speaking a little slower, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
but he was all there, and
But I bet he hadn't been sick, you know.
well, I'd heard like Conrad had that he had not been well. So
Yeah.
somebody said he'd been in the hospital.
Well, he had had a bout with pneumonia, but then someone said he was having heart problems.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I don't know
Yeah.
what the story is there, because he has not come in usually.
I thought for somebody who had been sick, he
pretty decent.
acted and sounded pretty good.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Good, that's good to hear.
But this poem, I wrote it in June of 2012,
Okay.
so now we're going on 6 years ago.
So have you updated it, or is it pretty much like it
It's
was?
still about the way it was.
Okay. Well, you know, a good poem doesn't need anything.
Yeah. Thank you. As the cloud of the thick gun smoke slowly cleared away, there was little to nothing left for all of them to say. The gun battle, most said, hadn't lasted long at all. But all 4 men were found to die as each began to fall. The bodies of the men writhing in the street, with a lot of blood gushing and scuffed up boots still on their feet. Within days, all 4 would be dead or gone, including the 2 lawmen, with one they called John. Amos Wolford was the tall and lanky town marshal's name, brother to John, and there wore badges and fought for the same. The citizens of Winnsboro was much saddened that eventful day to lose such great lawmen as the skies turned a hazy and spooky dark gray. How could 4 men start such a frightful fight, and each feel it would be in their own right? It all began as the citizens hated to walk about town and see all the rowdiness, gambling, and such happenings to be. In the year of 1907, most had already told the Wolford boys they were tired of all this, and especially the fears and all the loud noise. Stop all this in our town and make us proud, they all asked. Amos and John left knowing this would be a huge and risky task. They closed many saloons and gambling halls all about. Got most of them closed, but the ornery ones were the ones that hung out. A few of the saloon owners raved that they wanted those 2 lawmen dead. It would be easy with a pair of 6 guns and a few rounds of flying lead. Dick Milam called his son Willie in Dallas and said, "Get on the morning train." Said, "I'll meet you there a little after 12 with a gun, and this won't be in vain." The train arrived, and Willie got off and cautiously and slowly looked around. He saw a lot of people, but his dad he wanted was finally close to being found. They met up, and he had to explain the trouble to come. Willie was not worried, scared, concerned, or not even numb. A well-known local cattleman by the name of Jim Galt was talking to Amos and John, unaware that one man's death would be before the next rising dawn. As they slowly walked down the street of the Bowery, the name it was called, they met the lawmen as they approached Elm Street. Then time seemed to have stalled. Beads of sweat and cold, hard looks began to appear on all their faces. Knowing this could be, for one or all, the final end of all the damn places. Soon, words were spoken, and young Willie attacked John with a loaded cane. And this is what began of all this afternoon that left no shame. The guns were drawn after that blow by Willie crossed John's head, and from that point forward the gun battle was on, and 4 men would soon be dying or dead. There was little more to this story at the time that could have been said, but most of the story has been shared of all of that day's horrendous bloodshed. It took another 3 years to close all the rest of the Winnsboro saloons, something that 2 lawmen were attempting to do that one afternoon. It is said that bloodstains appear once in a while on the walls and the streets. Could this be their way to say John and Amos did not get scared and completely retreat? The street went into history, known as the Bowery, stayed dry for nearly 100 years. But now you can sit, have a beer or wine, without the rowdies, gaming houses, and any terrible fears. That's all.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, that's still works. So.
So they're starting to get some rowdies back at some of the saloons now.
Yeah. Not sure if y'all remember this one. Was talking about antique boots. I got a pair sitting at the house, and these are beginning to be antique right here. But,
If you hang
So-
on long enough, they'll become antique.
How old are those that are about to become antique?
these are only about 5 years old.
Oh, they got
I'm an antique.
So
okay?
how old are the ones that you describe as now?
I have no idea. They are old. So this poem,
Were you the first to wear them?
no.
Oh.
No. I picked them up at a garage sale, and they just, they look something like I had to have. Just had to have. This is called Antique Boots by Clark Crouch.
Okay, this is not an original one.
No, this is not original.
Okay.
It is by Clark, but not written by me. It was just some cowboy boots. Not much as antiques go. But they was right there on sale at the mall's antique show. Could have been Conrad's place. They was badly scarred and worn. The price was very low. And they was toward the back. Sort of hidden, you know. It made you sort of wonder just where they'd all been. Just where they'd trod and wandered that brought them to that stall. If only them boots could talk about the life on the range, it'd be fascinating and maybe somewhat strange. But answers are locked away. We'll never hear the tale of how them boots came to be there in the antique sale. Anyhow, I bought them boots, took them home with me as a tribute to the days of when the West was free. They now sit upon the hearth on permanent display, given a place of honor and pondered on each day.
Mm.
That's all I got.
That's all you got. That's enough.
Okay. Good. Okay. Oh, I know what.
You know what?
Yeah, it probably ran out,
Oh,
and I needed to restart it. I'm glad you noticed that.
well, I noticed certain things.
Because it stops automatically after a certain
After
number of minutes.
3.5 minutes.
29 and a half, I think.
Yeah, 3.5 minutes.
But if that red dot stops blinking or goes away, stop me and we'll restart it.
I shall do that.
Hey, you did good, but
Hope you're not going to be talking for a half hour, though. I could fall asleep.
Well, I don't know that that's what happened. But I thought I had it going, but I guess I didn't. The Tenant Chapel Quintessential Country Church concert is tomorrow night. Tenant Chapel Music Night, Praise and Gospel concert. Tomorrow night it'll be Doc and Chris Martinson, called Doc the Singing Storyteller, and then they'll be followed by the Berry Brothers, Roger and Donnie, Cater Hill Heritage Group, Ron and Kathy Lawson, husband-wife group that's popular, and we'll have a guy named Randy Brown, who I think both of y'all have.
Yeah, I know Randy. I got his CDs for sale right here in the shop.
Mineola, and he travels probably almost as much as Lindy and Lynn. Travels all over the country. If you look at his website, you'll see that he performs in a lot of other states as well as
He
Texas.
just won an award, a songwriter award.
Yeah, that's on his website
down
right
in
now.
Florida.
He's won some kind of, the Florida award. And I just happened to run into him at Quitman recently, and he had a, he was home, and somebody told him about that bluegrass jam there, and he came. I don't know if it's his first time to ever be there or not, but anyway, I happened to sit next to him, and I didn't recognize him at first. He didn't identify himself, and they don't usually call names at that bluegrass jam. People just get up, they've got a number, and they know when they're supposed to perform. And he performed a song that I really enjoyed. It was a funny song, and I enjoyed it. He sat down right next to me after he got done, and I gave him a little note saying, "Can you perform this same song at Tenney Chapel, January 20th?" And two more, 3 songs. And he waited until there was a lull, and he said, "I'm a Facebook friend of yours." I said, well, okay, but I'm not on Facebook anymore, And so anyway, and it turns out he's free this night, and he's agreed to be at our. He's, I guess, what you'd call, I don't know, pro or semi-pro or something, whatever, kind of in the same category, I think, of as Lindy. And then George Jordan, our Tenney Chapel original troubadour, will wind up. That starts at 6:30, ends at 8. It's free, open to the public. I'm going to, I think, I gave some thought to exactly what I wanted to try to do on this. I don't know whether I can, here it is. This was something that I don't have a date on. I'm not sure. It may be that Doc gave me this at some point. There's no writing on it. Somebody ran it off. Maybe I did and forgot about it. I don't know. But it's called The Poet Speaks. And it kind of speaks to me to the way poets operate. Doc read one of his original poems a while ago. And I'm just read you just a little bit, a paragraph or two out of this, because I was kind of caught into it. You are the poet, and the poet speaks through the art and the craft of poetry. The National League of American Pen Women, that's P-E-N, has thousands of creative poets who are more than competent. However, not ever the most astute of us can be aware of everything we know every time we write. We consider, then we reconsider. Eventually, we unconsciously incorporate a multiplicity of techniques into the writing, the thought process. Technique and illustrations of technique can fill a big book. Since this column is not even a small book, we will selectively identify and explore some of the rules and tools of poetry. For every writer, every time, the most important rule is the writer's cue. C-U-E, cue. When you're writing, if you miss your cue, you have a fatal flaw. The following is self-explanatory. C-U-E, remember, your cue is spelled C-U-E. The C in cue. Coherence. One thought follows another logically. The U in cue. Unity. A feeling of oneness. The E in cue. Emphasis. The single controlling idea. Be aware that generally the present is stronger than the past, the active is stronger than the passive, the specific is stronger than the general. Example, present versus past. It was summer. Squirrel frisked. Poppies blazed. It is summer. Squirrels frisk. Poppies blaze. Note that in the above example, present tense is crisper and more active. Example, active versus passive. She was screaming into the night. The echoes were roiling. She screams into the night. Echoes roll. Here the word active says it all. Active is faster, more to the point. Example, specific versus general. Let us remember that Wordsworth is remembered for his host of golden daffodils, not his host of golden flowers. Also, if you go back to the above definition of present versus past, would you rather see poppies blaze or posies blaze? That's really all of this that I was going to emphasize. There's another about the same amount, and I'll give you the topics. There's some more detail. One of them is called the notebook habit. You know, one of the things I carry in my pocket all the time is a little notebook. Always ready to. Who was it? Some famous person at one time said the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. So I highly recommend carrying a notebook all the time. And then word work is another topic. If the word is not working, remove it, is the point of this one. I won't go into more detail on it. Learn professional vocabulary. It enhances professional communication. Again, there's several lines on that. And finally, it ends with a section on group your particulars for image, meaning if you're going to have a garden, people your garden with a real toad, warm, juicy angleworms, and a dozen fuzzy, creeping caterpillars. You know. So, give us a reason to care is kind of the emphasis of the whole thing. I thought it was kind of interesting, and again, I don't know how I came about this.
Something I gave you.
Didn't ring a bell.
That sounds like something that Bonnie would share.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where I got it, because it was in my Live Poets
Right.
satchel here.
Yeah, that sounds kind of Bonnie-ish.
Yeah, you're probably right. I hadn't thought of that, but you're probably
I
right.
doubt if she wrote it, but
Or something that
she would have shared it.
it might have been a friend of hers or her. And you remember the lady Lucy Germany, who one of
Yep.
our original members?
Yeah,
She would sometimes share stuff like that.
Right. I've got a couple of books here for sale.
Yeah. Okay.
Thing that
Yeah,
she
they
did.
are.
The African stuff.
I was going to read one fairly short poem by W.H. Auden,
Okay.
A-U-D-E-N.
I've heard of him.
Born 1907. I think that was the year my father was born, and died in 1973. So he was overlapped in our lifetimes. And I'll just say the introduction to this poem, the compiler of this book of poems gives a little short introduction to all of them. And he says, if I could tell you, that's the title of the poem, and the compiler says that it's one of W.H. Auden's most beautiful lyrical poems. Like much of his verse, it may strike the reader as opaque. It is certainly enigmatic. And that was my thinking when I was reading the poem. Enigmatic I probably thought puzzling, rather than enigmatic, but that is a good description of the poem, I think. But that is what Auden is talking about here in the poem. The difficulty of understanding that which simply is and cannot necessarily be explained. I would say that there are people I've met who could be described that way. Several of the lines are very haunting. If we should weep when clowns put on their show, and the winds must come from somewhere when they blow, are both examples of lines that are very haunting. The compiler, never tires of reading this poem because he finds it an experience very similar to listening to a particular beautiful passage of Mozart. Now, I can identify with that. I've listened to a lot of Mozart. I have a lot of his music on CD. There's nothing in any of his work that I ever listened to that I didn't like. You know, absolutely nothing. You know, I've listened to several of his operas all the way through and enjoyed the. You know, I'm not an opera fan, generally speaking, but I like the Mozart operas. You know. Anyway, this guy says, I, the compiler, am haunted by this poem. So I'm going to read this Auden poem titled, If I Could Tell You. Time will say nothing but I told you so. Time only knows the price we have to pay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. If we should weep when clowns put on their show, if we should stumble when musicians play, time will say nothing but I told you so. There are no fortunes to be told, although, because I love you more than I can say. If I could tell you, I would let you know. The winds must come from somewhere when they blow. There must be reasons why the leaves decay. Time will say nothing, but I told you so. Perhaps the roses really want to grow. Their vision seriously intends to stay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. Suppose the lions all get up and go, and the books and the soldiers run away. Will time say nothing but I told you so? If I could tell you, I would let you know. Copyright 1940, in our lifetimes.
Well, before mine.
Huh?
Before my lifetime.
Oh, were you born after 1940?
Yes, I was. So was Don.
Was too.
Oh, you were too? I can't imagine that. I can't imagine anybody being born before.
Man.
I started school in 1940,
What?
first grade.
Well, he was a little older than we. A couple of years. I was born in
Oh, we're supposed to end up.
We're
with
supposed to end up with how to read a
40?
poem and enjoy it. Love poetry.
When was you born?
43.
43.
End of 43.
What, 3?
43.
I was
You
born
were
49.
close.
I was born 49.
Oh, man, you were my
We were
sister.
both.
You nearly graduated when I.
No, I was in high school.
Uh,
I think I started high school about 47
Okay.
or 48. See, 48, I guess. 48,
You were
49,
my big
48,
brother.
49,
You're my big
49,
brother.
50, 50, 51. Yeah, I started in 48.
Yeah.
This is the last, we ended up, and we're going to be reading what is the last verse of a poem that we've taken a while in this book by John Hirsch to read. Death arrives among all that sound, like a shoe with no foot in it, like a suit with no man in it, comes and knocks, using a ring with no stone in it, with no finger in it, comes and shouts with no mouth, with no tongue, with no throat. Well, I'm tempted, since that's the last line in it, to read the last verse in it, to read a few lines here that apparently is kind of reflecting on that.
Okay, you can do it.
Says,
We'll let you.
in this sequence of images, Neruda repeatedly presents a human object, but withdraws the human presence from it. He posits a shoe, but takes away the foot that wears it. He presents a suit, but withdraws the man who would inhabit it. Death comes and knocks, but it uses a ring without a stone or a finger. The progression: death shouts with no mouth, with no tongue, with no throat, mimics a process of taking a voice away in stages. These images all incarnate the paradox of a presence that is absence. Oh, I love that. These images all incarnate the paradox of a presence that is absence. Nevertheless, he writes, using a logical proposition as in a poem by Donne or Marvell, it, quote, its steps can be heard and its clothing makes a hushed sound like a tree. Neruda has created an imagery for something which cannot be seen, something mysterious, indistinct, real. Yeah, that again reminds me of, what a good writer this Edward, I keep calling him John, Edward Hirsch. How to Read a Poem and Fall in Love with Poetry. And I think the best thing about this book is Edward Hirsch's commentary, on the poems. And this sort of thing. Are we all set for tomorrow night?
Yep. Got more stuff loaded and got my guitar tuned and got the story put together.
Got what?
My story put together.
There you
Oh,
go.
thank you. And thank the host.